The final scream was not of pain, but of unraveling. Voldemort, or what remained of him, imploded with a sound like ancient parchment tearing, leaving behind nothing but a fine dust that scattered on the wind. Harry Potter stood amidst the rubble of the Great Hall, the Elder Wand heavy and humming in his hand, a silent witness to a tyranny extinguished. Silence, profound and absolute, descended upon Hogwarts. It was a silence Harry had never known, not after a duel, not even after the roar of a crowd. This was the silence of cessation, of a war finally, truly over. He felt a phantom tremor in his scar, a ghost of a connection severed, leaving behind a raw, aching void. His knees threatened to buckle, not from exhaustion, though he was bone-weary, but from the sudden, terrifying lack of a singular purpose that had defined his entire life. He looked down at the Elder Wand. Its power was undeniable, a vibrant current thrumming through his fingers, a silent testament to the ultimate defeat. But the joy, the triumphant surge he'd anticipated for years, was absent. Instead, a hollow echo resonated within him, a vast emptiness where relief should have bloomed. The Great Hall, once a bastion of warmth and laughter, was a charnel house. Broken bodies lay still under the splintered beams, dust motes dancing in the shafts of weak dawn light filtering through shattered windows. He saw the grief in the slumped shoulders of survivors, the vacant stares fixed on loved ones who would never rise again. "Harry!" Hermione's voice, raspy with tears and strain, cut through the oppressive quiet. She and Ron stumbled towards him, their faces streaked with grime and tears, but their eyes alight with a fragile, desperate hope. Ron threw an arm around him, a shuddering breath escaping his lips. "You did it, mate. You killed him." Harry could only nod, the word killed feeling inadequate, almost disrespectful to the sheer, existential annihilation Voldemort had just suffered. He met Hermione's gaze, her eyes swollen, but radiating an almost painful adoration. "It's over, Harry," she whispered, reaching out to grasp his free hand, her fingers trembling. "We won." But even as she spoke the words, a chill began to seep into the air. It wasn't the pre-dawn cold of a late spring morning. This was deeper, more invasive, a cold that seemed to sink into the very bones, stealing warmth from the lingering embers of hope. The dust motes, which had danced almost merrily moments before, now seemed to swirl with a sinister, agitated energy. The ancient stones of Hogwarts, which should have breathed a sigh of relief, instead groaned with a new kind of tension. A prickle ran up Harry's spine. He tightened his grip on the Elder Wand. It still hummed, but the notes seemed to have shifted, growing deeper, almost dissonant. The raw, untamed magic that had flooded the space upon Voldemort's destruction, a veritable maelstrom of released power, hadn't quite dissipated. It lingered, coalescing, not in the triumphant manner of a celebratory fireworks display, but with a predatory hunger. From the very heart of the residual magic, where Voldemort's essence had dissolved, a darkness began to form. It wasn't the smoky blackness of a Death Eater apparition or the shimmering veil of a Dementor. This was a deeper, pure void, an absence that swallowed light and sound. The air grew impossibly heavy, tasting of ash and old fear. The groans of the castle intensified, not from structural damage, but as if the very spirit of Hogwarts was being squeezed. Then, from the impenetrable darkness, a shape began to emerge. It was tall, slender, and unnervingly human. A black habit materialized first, woven from the deepest shadows, followed by a pale, gaunt face framed by a pristine white wimple. Two eyes, like chips of obsidian, glowed with malevolent intelligence, devoid of compassion, devoid of life, yet radiating an ancient, hungry sentience. It was a nun, terrifying in its spectral purity, horrific in its absolute blasphemy. A gasp went through the scattered survivors in the hall. Some cried out, others clutched at loved ones, a fresh wave of terror rippling through the war-exhausted crowd. Ron, his face pale, instinctively drew his wand, but his hand shook. Hermione pressed closer to Harry, her breath catching in her throat. What is that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Harry felt a cold dread seize his heart, colder than any encounter with a Dementor. This was different. this was wrong. He raised the Elder Wand, its power flaring, a brilliant silver light against the encroaching gloom. Expelliarmus, he shouted, the ancient spell an instinctual response to danger. A beam of scarlet light shot forth, aimed directly at the spectral figure. It struck the nun-like entity dead center. But instead of recoiling or even shimmering, the darkness around her seemed to absorb the magic. The light simply dissolved, leaving no trace, no impact. The entity remained unmoving, its obsidian eyes fixed on Harry with an unnerving intensity, as if amused. Harry's heart hammered against his ribs. He tried again, summoning every ounce of his will, channeling the incredible power of the Elder Wand. Stupefy. This time, a bolt of emerald light, fierce and potent, streaked across the hall. It met the figure, and again, nothing. The light vanished. The cold deepened. A faint, horrifying whisper seemed to slither through the hall, not with words, but with pure, unadulterated despair. It clawed at the edges of their minds, threatening to pull them down into the crushing weight of their losses. Harry saw students cowering, their faces contorting not just in fear, but in profound, spiritual anguish. He saw the shadows around them deepen, drawing closer as if feeding on their terror. This was not a duel, not a battle of spells. This was something else entirely. It's not physical, Hermione breathed, her face etched with horror and dawning comprehension. Traditional magic, it's not working. The nun-like entity began to glide forward, silently, effortlessly, its movements utterly devoid of human grace, yet terrifyingly precise. It moved towards the most vulnerable, towards those slumped in grief, their spiritual defenses shattered by the war. As it passed near a young Hufflepuff, the boy let out a strangled cry, his eyes rolling back in his head, his face contorting in pure agony. A shadowy tendril seemed to brush him, a fleeting touch that left an indelible mark of spiritual desolation. Harry felt a surge of desperate fury. He pointed the Elder Wand, not at the creature, but at the despair it was cultivating, trying to cast a Patronus. Expecto Patronum. A glimmer of silver light, his stag, sprang from his wand, but it was weak, flickering, struggling against the suffocating cold. It charged towards the spectral nun, only to waver and dissipate before it could even reach her. The entity merely tilted its head, a silent gesture that spoke volumes of its disdain for such light magic. A bone-chilling realization settled upon Harry. This creature wasn't just powerful, it was fundamentally different. All his years of training, all the spells he'd learned, all the raw power he possessed, even with the Elder Wand, it was useless. It was like trying to fight a fire with air, or a shadow with a fist. His victory over Voldemort, the culmination of 17 years of suffering and sacrifice, now felt utterly, sickeningly hollow. The ultimate evil had been vanquished, only for another, far more insidious terror to rise from its ashes. Valak, the Defiler, though Harry didn't yet know its name, was here. And Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the master of death, stood powerless before it, the Elder Wand a mere stick in his hand, unable to even scratch the surface of this new, spiritual darkness that threatened to consume them all. The war, it seemed, was far from over. And for the first time, Harry had no idea how to fight it. The Great Hall was a mausoleum of whispered grief and dazed exhaustion. The morning light, usually a cheerful cascade through its enchanted windows, now felt thin and cold, revealing too much. Harry stood amongst the wounded and the mourning, the Elder Wand still clutched in his hand, its immense power a heavy, silent accusation. Voldemort was gone, a twisted husk reduced to dust, yet the victory tasted like ash. A chill, deeper than the early spring air, permeated the ancient stones, stirring a primal unease in the pit of Harry's stomach. He saw it in the vacant stares of the survivors, the tremors in their hands as they tried to comfort one another. It wasn't just the trauma of war, it was an amplification, a dark echo of their despair. A young Ravenclaw, huddled near a shattered pillar, suddenly shrieked, clutching her head as if unseen talons were tearing at her thoughts. Her eyes, wide and bloodshot, darted around as if seeing phantoms. Healers rushed to her, but their calming drafts seemed to have little effect. She just kept whispering about shadows and coldness. Harry felt a prickle down his spine. This was Valak's doing. The entity he'd seen, or rather, felt, after Voldemort's demise. The one his spells had simply passed through, leaving him feeling utterly, terrifyingly impotent. He moved through the hall, his senses heightened. The air grew perceptibly colder in certain pockets, making the hairs on his arms stand on end. He caught glimpses of movement at the edge of his vision, a flicker of black habit, a skeletal hand reaching out, only to vanish when he turned his head directly. It fed on the fear, the sorrow, the spiritual void left by so much death and destruction. Hogwarts, once a bastion of protective magic, felt like a banquet for this unseen horror. "Harry!" Hermione's voice, sharp with urgency, cut through the quiet despair. She found him near the shattered teacher's table, her face smudged with soot and exhaustion, but her eyes burning with fierce determination. Ron was with her, leaning heavily on a wall, his face pale and etched with grief for Fred, but he nodded grimly at Harry. "Hermione, Ron," Harry acknowledged, his voice hoarse. "It's still here, isn't it? That thing?" Hermione nodded, her jaw tight. "I think so. The wards around the castle feel wrong. Not broken, not like when the Death Eaters attacked, but distorted. Like a suffocating blanket. And people are succumbing to their grief in ways that aren't natural. The despair is palpable, almost a living thing. I tried spells," Harry admitted, the shame burning his throat. "Killing curses, ancient banishing charms, nothing. It just flowed through them." Hermione's brow furrowed. "I know. I try to view myself from a distance. It's like it exists on a different plane. Physical spells don't touch it. It's spiritual." She gestured vaguely. "I've been in the library, what's left of it. I found something, Harry. Something truly ancient and disturbing." The three of them found a relatively intact corner of the library, far from the main hall's oppressive gloom. Books lay scattered, shelves toppled, but Hermione had managed to clear a small space. She presented them with a thick, leather-bound tome, its pages brittle and yellowed, titled Essays on the Preternatural and Ethereal Manifestations. It was so old, the lettering was almost completely faded. "This book," Hermione explained, tapping a diagram of intricate, glowing sigils that seemed to resonate with an energy Harry couldn't quite place, speaks of entities that feed on raw spiritual essence. Not Dementors. Dementors feed on happiness. These prey on the very soul, on faith, on hope. And they're impervious to most conventional magic because they aren't truly of our physical realm. So what has stopped them?" Ron asked, his voice laced with a fear Harry recognized. Hermione chewed her lip, flipping to a passage marked with a delicate, silver bookmark. "This is where it gets unconventional. It talks about anathema, a term used to describe a spiritual banishment, a rejection of evil through profound conviction. It mentions a rare kind of magic, or perhaps not magic at all, but a synthesis. A merging of intense magical intent with something called unwavering spiritual clarity, or purity of heart. Harry frowned. Purity of heart? What does that even mean? Are we talking about Muggle religion? The thought felt alien. Wizards dealt with potions and incantations, not prayers and sacraments. Not necessarily religion in the dogmatic sense, Hermione clarified, pointing to another passage. It speaks of benevolent spiritual traditions, of genuine belief and ritualistic conviction. It sounds like focused, pure intent and will, but channeled differently than through a wand for a spell. Almost like a direct conduit to a higher power, whatever that may be. She paused, looking at the Elder Wand still in Harry's hand. And this book explicitly mentions that certain rare artifacts, imbued with immense magical history and power, can act as conduits for this kind of spiritual resonance. Like a lightning rod for a new kind of power. Harry looked at the Elder Wand. He'd felt its power when he'd faced Voldemort, a connection deeper than any wand he'd ever held. Had he inadvertently tapped into something beyond traditional magic then? The book also references an unspeakable, Hermione continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper, who dedicated her life to this forgotten lore. A Sister Eleanora Vance. She was exiled, or perhaps she simply vanished from the ministry's records decades ago after proposing unorthodox theories. The book says she delved into ancient, pre-Hogwarts spiritual wards and the very intersection of arcane and divine power. An unspeakable who believes in faith magic? Ron scoffed, then immediately winced, sensing Harry's seriousness. Sorry, it just sounds mad. Mad or our only hope, Harry said grimly. Where is she? This Sister Eleanora Vance. Hermione looked down at the tome, her finger tracing a faded glyph. The book implies she sought solitude after her theories were rejected. It suggests a retreat, somewhere ancient, a place imbued with its own deep spiritual resonance. It's very vague, but it mentions a hidden abbey in the Highlands, a place where the veil between worlds is thin and faith holds true against the encroaching shadow. Just then, a wave of profound despair washed over them. It wasn't physical. It was an emotional onslaught, crushing Harry's spirit, reminding him of every loss, every sacrifice, every moment of fear he'd ever known. He staggered, clutching the Elder Wand. Ron groaned, dropping to his knees, his hands covering his face. Even Hermione, usually so stoic, swayed and pressed a hand to her temple. From the hallway, a soft, chilling Gregorian chant seemed to echo, a sound that amplified the crushing weight of their sorrow rather than dispelling it. It was Valak, not speaking, but singing its song of desolation, burrowing deeper into the fractured psyches of Hogwarts survivors. Harry fought through the wave, forcing himself upright. He could feel Valak's presence growing stronger, closer, emboldened by the sheer magnitude of suffering around them. It was time to stop being a wizard and start being something more. He looked at Hermione, his eyes firm. We need to find her. We need to find Sister Eleanora Vance. Hermione, though still pale, nodded decisively. I'll research ancient abbeys in the Scottish Highlands. Places with a history of spiritual significance. It won't be easy. The ministry won't have records of someone like her, not anymore. I'll go with you, Ron declared, pushing himself up, though still looking shaken. We face this together. Harry met his gaze, a flash of gratitude passing between them. He tightened his grip on the Elder Wand. This wasn't a battle of spells, it was a battle for the soul of Hogwarts and, perhaps, the entire wizarding world. The chilling chant intensified, a promise of eternal despair. Valak was here, and it was waiting. They had to find a way to fight it before Hogwarts became its eternal shrine. The air grew thin, sharp with the scent of pine and damp earth as Harry and Hermione disapparated to the edge of what felt like an ancient, forgotten world. Gone were the crumbling stone and ash of Hogwarts. Here, towering gnarled oaks, their branches draped in moss, formed a living cathedral. A faint, almost imperceptible shimmering veil suggested powerful wards, not just magical, but something older, woven into the very fabric of the forest. She lives deep within these woods, Hermione murmured, consulting a faded, hand-drawn map. The coordinates were incredibly obscure, hidden in a forgotten corner of the Ministry archives. Harry clutched the Elder Wand, its smooth wood feeling unnervingly warm in his hand. The weight of it, the ghost of its true power, still hummed beneath his skin. But it was a power he no longer fully understood. He still felt the spectral cold of Valak's presence, an icy dread that clung to the edges of his senses, even in this peaceful place. He needed answers, and quickly. They followed a winding, overgrown path, the silence punctuated only by the rustling of unseen creatures and the distant cry of a hawk. Eventually, through a gap in the ancient trees, they saw it, a small, unassuming cottage, built from dark, weathered stone, practically swallowed by ivy. No smoke rose from its chimney, yet a faint, warm glow emanated from within. As they approached, a figure emerged from the doorway. Sister Eleanora Vance. She was not the stooped, frail woman Harry might have imagined. Her posture was erect, her movements fluid and purposeful despite her apparent age. Her face, framed by wisps of silver hair escaping a simple dark headscarf, was etched with a lifetime of contemplation, her eyes a startlingly vibrant blue that seemed to see right through him. She wore plain, unadorned robes that spoke of simplicity rather than ecclesiastical dogma. Harry Potter, her voice was a calm, melodic contralto, and Hermione Granger. "I've been expecting you." There was no surprise, only a deep, quiet understanding in her tone. Hermione, ever practical, produced her ministry identification. Eleonora simply waved a hand. "No need. The spirits of the forest speak of the turmoil you carry, and the entity you chase." Her gaze settled on the Elder Wand. "That artifact, it is both blessing and burden, isn't it?" Harry nodded, feeling an inexplicable urge to confide in her. "It tore something open, sister. Something, not magical. It's like Voldemort, but worse. You can't fight it with spells." Eleonora led them inside. The cottage was sparse, but immaculately clean, filled with the scent of dried herbs and old parchment. Books, not just magical tomes, but ancient philosophical texts and spiritual scrolls, lined every wall. A single, beeswax candle flickered on a worn wooden table. "You are correct," Eleonora said, gesturing for them to sit. "Valak, the Defiler, is not a creature of the material plane, not in the way your Dark Lord was. It feeds on the spiritual rot left by your war, the despair, the fear, the fractured faith in yourselves and your world." She looked at Harry, her blue eyes piercing. "Your traditional magic, potent as it is like trying to fight a shadow with a physical fist. It passes right through." Hermione, always seeking clarity, leaned forward. "But the Elder Wand, you said it was a conduit. How can it fight something that's not physical?" "The Elder Wand," Eleonora began, her voice gaining a quiet intensity, "is more than a tool of power. It is a resonance chamber for intent. For the truly pure of heart, the unyielding of spirit, it can bridge the gap between the material and the immaterial. It can amplify conviction, not just magical energy." Harry furrowed his brow. "Conviction? What does that even mean?" He was a wizard. He knew spells, incantations, wand movements. This felt abstract. Eleonora smiled gently. "It means belief, Harry. Not just belief in a spell, but belief in the righteousness of your cause, in the purity of your intent, in the sacredness of life itself. It is the unwavering conviction that evil has no place, that light must prevail. It is the core of who you are, projected outwards, amplified by this unique instrument." She tapped the Elder Wand with a gnarled finger. "Magic commands. Faith resonates. Against a creature like Valak, resonance is a far more potent weapon." Over the next few days, Harry found himself in an unfamiliar and often frustrating learning environment. Eleonora didn't teach him new incantations or wand movements. Instead, she taught him stillness. She guided him through exercises of meditation, not to clear his mind, but to focus it, to distill his purpose into an unwavering point of light. "Feel the light within you, Harry," she would instruct, her voice soft but firm. "The light of your courage, your compassion, your will to protect. Don't simply think it, become it. Let it flow from your core, through your arm, into the Elder Wand. Let the wand echo your soul's unwavering truth." Harry tried. He closed his eyes, imagined the warmth, the fierce protective instinct that had always driven him. He lifted the Elder Wand, not as if to cast a spell, but as if to offer a silent prayer. Nothing happened. Or, at best, a faint, almost invisible shimmer of air, quickly dissipating. "I don't understand, sister," he'd frustratedly confess. "It just feels empty. Like I'm pretending." Hermione, ever the diligent scholar, observed from a corner, taking meticulous notes. "Perhaps it's a form of active meditation, Harry. A directed consciousness. We've seen hints of intent-based magic in ancient runes, but never anything quite like this." Eleonora merely nodded. "You are accustomed to doing magic, Harry. Now you must learn to be magic. To embody the sacred truth you wish to invoke. Valak feeds on spiritual weakness, on doubt. Your power here must be born of spiritual strength, of absolute certainty." While Harry grappled with these esoteric concepts, news from Hogwarts became increasingly grim. Owls arrived daily, carrying worried letters from Professor McGonagall and the few remaining staff. Students were suffering from horrific nightmares, waking up screaming about shadowy figures and guttural whispers. Paranoia was on the rise, Small disagreements flared into furious accusations. Peeves, for all his mischief, had fallen silent, replaced by a cold, unsettling dread that permeated the castle. The joy and relief of victory had curdled into a palpable, collective fear. One particularly disturbing report detailed a series of poltergeist-like phenomena unlike Peeves' usual antics. Objects weren't merely thrown. They were twisted, broken with malicious intent. A student, a timid Hufflepuff, had been found catatonic in a secluded corridor, whispering about the nun before slipping into a deep, unresponsive slumber. Valak was not idle. It was weaving its web, subtly, insidiously, feeding on the despair. The defiler grows stronger, Eleonora stated grimly after reading a letter that spoke of increasing dread amongst the castle's younger occupants. It is lacing the very air with spiritual poison. We cannot afford to wait for your perfect understanding, Harry. You must try a preliminary ward. She led him to a small clearing outside her cottage. The air here felt charged, the forest spirits watching. Channel that protective instinct within you, she instructed. Do not think of a spell, but of a shield of pure, unblemished conviction. Project it from the Elder Wand, not as a burst of power, but as a silent, unwavering declaration that this space is consecrated, inviolable by malevolent spirits. Harry took a deep breath, clutching the Elder Wand. He closed his eyes, pushing away the image of Valak, the nightmares, the fear. He thought of his friends, of the innocent students, of the sanctity of Hogwarts itself. He poured every ounce of his resolve, his belief in good, into the wand. He wasn't casting, he was willing. He was declaring. A faint, ethereal blue light pulsed from the Elder Wand, not bright like a Patronus, but soft, profound, like moonlight through mist. It spread outwards, creating a delicate, almost invisible dome that shimmered with an inner glow. It felt different. It wasn't a magical barrier that could deflect a curse. It felt like a spiritual membrane, vibrating with a silent refusal to admit darkness. It worked. Hermione gasped, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and scientific curiosity. It's a protective field, but I can't detect any magical residue. It's entirely different. Eleonora nodded, a hint of satisfaction on her face. A shield of conviction. It is rudimentary, but it is real. You are beginning to tap into it, Harry. Now focus. Before Harry could celebrate, the peaceful clearing suddenly felt cold. Not physically, but with a creeping spiritual chill that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. The leaves on the ancient oaks rustled, though there was no wind. A whispered voice, faint and insidious, slithered into his mind, mimicking Ginny's voice. You failed, Harry. You always fail. They're all suffering because of you. Their fear, it's delicious. The voice was laced with despair, designed to twist his nascent conviction into doubt. His nascent shield flickered, threatening to collapse. Harry gasped, clutching his head, the spectral cold seeping into his bones. Valak wasn't just influencing Hogwarts, it was testing him directly. He fought back, summoning the image of Ginny as she was, vibrant and strong, banishing the warped whisper. He focused on the blue light, forcing his conviction to burn brighter, pushing back the insidious cold. The voice shrieked, a soundless scream that only he could hear, then retreated, leaving him panting, but unbroken. It knows you're learning, Harry, Eleonora said, her voice grave. It's testing your resolve. You must be prepared. Valak will not hesitate to strike at your weakest points, your deepest fears. The next time, it will not be a whisper. The air within Hogwarts had ceased to merely feel heavy. Now, it hummed with an insidious chill that no warming charm could dissipate. It was a cold that crept into one's bones, settled in the heart, and whispered doubts into the mind. Days turned into a gray blur, punctuated by the growing unease among the surviving students and staff. Valak's presence, though unseen by most, was a suffocating shroud, drawing sustenance from every lingering fear, every silent grief. Harry, guided by Sister Eleonora, had spent hours trying to project the simple, cleansing faith she taught him. He'd carved intricate anathema wards into the castle stone with his wand, etched symbols of purity and light into the common room walls. Hermione, her face pale from lack of sleep, had reinforced them with ancient runic sequences she'd unearthed, but even their combined efforts felt like trying to dam a tsunami with a handful of pebbles. Valak was learning, adapting. It was no longer content with subtle manipulations. The first clear sign of its escalation came not from a terrorized student, but from a figure of immense magical prowess and unwavering cheer, Professor Filius Flitwick. It began subtly. The diminutive charms master, usually a whirlwind of energy and optimism, grew withdrawn, his movements jerky, his eyes occasionally flickering with an unnatural, calculating gleam. Then, the charm lessons took on a darker edge. Spells meant for levitation suddenly sent objects crashing with malicious force. His signature squeaky voice would sometimes drop into a gravelly, guttural rumble, laced with a mockery that made students blanch. Harry and Eleonora were alerted by a panicked Professor McGonagall, who found Flitwick in the Transfiguration courtyard, not teaching, but standing amidst a circle of writhing, shadowy figures conjured from thin air, his wand held like a dagger. When McGonagall challenged him, Flitwick's face twisted into a snarl that was unmistakably Valak's. Such sweet despair, Minerva, the warped voice hissed from Flitwick's small frame, a grotesque parody. And such potential. Imagine what I could do with this little body, this vast intellect. Harry and Eleonora arrived just as Flitwick, possessed, began to unleash spells of pure shadow and spiritual oppression. Traditional curses from McGonagall dissipated against a pulsing, invisible barrier of dread. Harry felt the familiar prickle of fear, but now, a flicker of Eleonora's teachings ignited within him. He didn't just react with a shield charm, he envisioned a wall of pure, unblemished light, a barrier of conviction. The Elder Wand hummed, resonating with his nascent faith, and a shimmering, golden shield flared into existence, holding back Flitwick's shadowy assault with surprising strength. It's Valak, Harry gritted out, the name tasting like ash. It's possessed him. Eleonora, her eyes focused, stepped forward, ignoring the chaotic magical battle. She held up a small, silver crucifix, not a religious symbol to her, but a focal point for concentrated spiritual truth. Defiler, she boomed, her voice resonating with an authority that silenced even the possessed Flitwick for a moment. Release this soul. Your dominion is not here. Flitwick shrieked, a sound of pure agony mixed with rage, and lashed out with a torrent of dark energy. Eleonora met it not with magic, but with a sheer force of will, a wave of spiritual repulsion that seemed to ripple the very air. Valak, temporarily dislodged from its host, writhed for a split second as a shadowy nun-like form, visible only to Harry and Eleonora, before plunging back into Flitwick with a triumphant, malicious laugh. You wound me, old woman, Flitwick Valak croaked, his eyes burning with renewed fury. But this vessel is mine. And soon, this castle will be too. With a final, chilling cackle, he vanished, operating with a burst of dark energy, leaving behind an even deeper chill and a trail of tangible despair. Back in the relative sanctuary of Eleonora's temporary wardroom, a rarely used chamber near the astronomy tower, consecrated with ancient salts and whispered incantations, Harry paced, his jaw clenched. We can't let it keep Flitwick. It'll use his knowledge, his power. He could corrupt the entire school from within. Hermione, hunched over a pile of brittle, leather-bound tomes, looked up, her face etched with exhaustion. Eleonora found a text. It speaks of a sacred banishing ritual. It's not just an exorcism, Harry. It's meant to sever a demonic entity's connection to this plane entirely, to cast it back to where it belongs. Eleonora nodded. It requires a space cleanse not just magically, but spiritually. It demands a conduit of immense power, capable of tearing the fabric between realms, yet also pure of heart. And it needs unwavering, absolute conviction from the primary caster. She met Harry's gaze, her eyes unwavering. You, Harry, with the Elder Wand. You are the Nexus. Harry felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Me? What if I fail? What if I just blast Professor Flitwick apart? You won't, Eleonora said calmly. Because your intent will be pure. Your goal is not destruction, but purification. The Elder Wand will amplify that intent, but you must provide the spiritual resonance. Hermione will prepare the space. I will guide the ancient rites. But the core, that is you. The preparations were arduous. Hermione, directed by Eleonora, meticulously cleaned and rewarded the astronomy tower chamber. She painted intricate protective circles and symbols of cleansing light onto the stone floor with a mixture of crushed moonstone, hallowed water, and ancient herbs. Every step was precise, every incantation whispered with fervent concentration. The air in the chamber, once stale, began to shimmer with a faint, hopeful light. Meanwhile, Harry, under Eleanor's tutelage, spent hours in meditative focus. He wasn't practicing spell casting, he was learning to feel. To feel the purity within himself, the interconnectedness of all living things, the benevolent energy that permeated the world, often unseen. He closed his eyes, holding the Elder Wand, and tried to manifest Eleonora's concept of divine light, a boundless, cleansing energy that was both part of him and part of the universe. It was humbling, frustrating work. His mind kept drifting back to Voldemort, to the fear, the pain, the emptiness of his victory. How could he embody purity when he felt so stained by war? It's not about absence of sin, Harry, Eleonora had explained, seeing his struggle. It's about unwavering commitment to truth, to goodness, to protection. That is your core, isn't it? When the time came, Professor Flitwick was lured back to the astronomy tower, ensnared by a series of powerful, ancient containment charms Hermione had laid down, specifically designed to trap a magically potent, but spiritually compromised, entity. He thrashed, his small body contorting grotesquely, his high-pitched squeals morphing into Valak's low, guttural growl. Inside the warded chamber, the air crackled with anticipation. Hermione stood at one point of the circle, chanting softly from a tattered scroll. Eleonora stood opposite her, holding a brazier of smoking frankincense, her voice a deep, steady hum of ancient, resonant words. Harry stood in the center, the Elder Wand clutched tight in his hand, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm. Focus, Harry, Eleonora commanded. Feel the light, the truth. Let it flow through you, through the wand. Harry closed his eyes, trying to clear his mind, to banish the doubt. He felt the Elder Wand thrumming, a raw, untamed power. He tried to merge it with the burgeoning spiritual energy Eleonora had taught him to tap into. He pictured a pure, golden light radiating from his chest, flowing into the wand, amplifying his desire to cleanse, to banish. From outside the ward, Valak screamed through Flitwick's lips, a high-pitched, mocking shriek that pierced Harry's concentration. You think you can cast me out, boy? I am older than your dusty god. I fed on the fear of your pathetic war, and I will feast on you now. Visions assaulted Harry's mind, the terrified faces of the dead at Hogwarts, Cedric's empty eyes, Sirius falling through the veil, his parents' final moments. Valak was trying to break his resolve, to twist his pure intent into fear and despair. Flitwick's possessed form began to glow with a sickly, purple light, straining against the containment. I can't. Harry gasped, sweat beading on his forehead. The images were too strong, the doubts too overwhelming. Yes, you can, Harry. Hermione's voice, clear and sharp, cut through the din. You face down Voldemort for love, for life. Tap into that. That's your faith. Eleonora's chant grew louder, deeper, filling the chamber with vibrating power. Your spirit is a shield, Harry. Your heart, a beacon. Let it shine. Believe. Harry, desperate, focused not on what he felt, but on what he knew. He knew he wanted to protect Flitwick, to save him. He knew he wanted this evil gone, forever. He let go of the need for an external, divine light and found it within himself, his unyielding will, forged in fire, to defend the innocent. He poured all of it, every ounce of his conviction, into the Elder Wand. The Elder Wand didn't just hum, it roared, vibrating with an intensity Harry had never experienced. A blinding white light erupted from its tip, not just magical, but imbued with a fierce, unwavering purity. It struck Flitwick's contorted form like a physical blow. The sickly purple light screamed, recoiled, and then exploded outwards in a burst of black mist. Professor Flitwick collapsed, unconscious, his small body unmoving. But the black mist didn't dissipate. It coalesced, swirling into a distinct, terrifying shape directly before Harry. It was Valak, fully manifested now, no longer needing a host. The horrifying nun, tall and gaunt, with eyes like pits of hell and teeth bared in a silent snarl, its black habit billowing in an unholy wind that only Harry seemed to feel. Its presence was a suffocating weight of pure malice. "You have injured me, child," Valak rasped, its voice a symphony of grating whispers and echoing screams, its form flickering as if made of shadow and nightmare. "You have made a grave mistake. You have forced my hand. Now you will witness true despair." The demonic entity, now unchained and terrifyingly real, took a step forward, its glowing eyes fixed on Harry, promising an end far worse than death. The final confrontation was no longer just a possibility. It was staring him in the face. The Great Hall, a place of triumph and sorrow just days prior, now pulsed with an insidious chill that no amount of warming charms could dispel. Sister Eleonora, her face etched with grim resolve, stood beside Harry and Hermione, her worn hands clasping a heavy, silver crucifix that seemed to glow faintly in the gloom. The air thrummed with a duality Harry had never encountered, the familiar magical aura of Hogwarts entwined with a pervasive, sickening spiritual corruption. At the far end of the hall, near the shattered remains of the head table, stood the possessed wizard, Percy Weasley. His usually earnest face was a mask of cold fury, his eyes devoid of their characteristic earnestness, replaced by the chilling, bottomless black of Valak. He stood unnaturally tall, his body a puppet for the demon, the black nun's habit shimmering faintly around his form, an illusion of dark sanctity that made Harry's skin crawl. "It has chosen a strong vessel," Sister Eleonora murmured, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "A mind predisposed to order, to duty, easy to corrupt with despair when that order shatters." "Percy," Hermione whispered, a desperate plea in her voice. "We have to save him, Harry." Harry gripped the Elder Wand, its smooth surface warm against his palm, yet humming with a power that felt both ancient and alien. He could feel Valak's presence like a physical weight, pressing down on him, whispering doubts into the corners of his mind. "You are weak, boy. A broken child. Your victory against Voldemort was a fluke, a trick of fate. You are nothing." "Valak," Harry called out, his voice firm, projecting a courage he didn't entirely feel. "Your time here is over. Leave this world. Leave this man." Percy, or rather, Valak, merely smiled. It was a cold, predatory baring of teeth that made the illusion of the nun's habit solidify, the ethereal black cloth seeming to ripple in the non-existent wind. "Over? It has just begun, anathema. You have merely opened the gate. And this world, it tastes so sweet with despair, so ripe for the harvest." Its voice was a cacophony of whispers and screeches, echoing from every corner of the vast hall, clawing at their sanity. "This vessel is potent, strong. He will serve my purpose, and through him, I shall claim this entire fortress of arcane blasphemy." With a flick of Valak's possessed wrist, the Great Hall's remaining banners tore themselves from the ceiling, whipping like angry serpents. The enchanted ceiling, usually a serene mirror of the sky, swirled into a vortex of dark, stormy clouds, complete with flashes of sickly green lightning that illuminated the grotesque shadow Valak cast. Ancient tapestries depicting noble wizarding history burst into flames, their magical preservation failing against the demon's raw spiritual assault. "Harry, remember your training," Eleonora urged, stepping forward slightly, her crucifix raised. "Not just spells, but conviction. Your intent must be pure, your will absolute." Harry aimed the Elder Wand. Traditional curses, Sectum Sempra, Confringo, Stupefy, burst forth, shimmering with their usual potency. But as they struck Percy's ethereal form, they merely dissipated into tendrils of black smoke, doing no apparent damage. Valak laughed, a dry, rattling sound that grated on Harry's nerves. "Futile boy. Your petty magics are as dust against true spiritual power." Valak raised Percy's hand, and a wave of pure, concentrated dread crashed over them. Harry felt his limbs turn to lead, his mind filling with visions of his failures, his losses, his loneliness. He saw Sirius falling, Cedric dying, his parents' vacant eyes. Hermione gasped, clutching her head, her face pale. Eleonora staggered, bracing herself against a stone pillar, muttering ancient words under her breath that seemed to vibrate with a faint golden light, pushing back against the encroaching despair. This was Valak's true weapon, fear. It fed on it, thrived on it, weaponized it. Harry struggled against the crushing weight, his breath catching in his throat. He was afraid, terrified. But then a thought surfaced, clear and sharp amidst the chaos. I will not let you win. Not again. He closed his eyes for a split second, taking a deep, shuddering breath. He remembered Eleonora's words, purity of spirit, Harry. Unwavering conviction. This isn't about power, it's about purpose. He remembered Dumbledore's cryptic advice about love being the greatest magic. He wasn't fighting for revenge or glory. He was fighting to protect, to cleanse, to banish this corruption from his world. When Harry opened his eyes, the fear was still there, a cold knot in his stomach, but something else had ignited within him. A fierce, unwavering warmth. He wasn't just Harry Potter, the boy who lived. He was Harry Potter, the Guardian. He raised the Elder Wand higher, not as a weapon of destruction, but as a conduit of pure will. You feed on despair, Harry declared, his voice cutting through Valak's cacophony. But this place, these people, they know hope. They know sacrifice. And they will not be defiled by your darkness. A faint golden light, invisible to the eye but palpable to Harry, began to emanate from his chest, radiating outwards. It was the purest manifestation of his intent, amplified by the Elder Wand. He wasn't casting a spell, he was projecting his very soul. Valak's smile faltered. What is this? The demon snarled, a flicker of genuine surprise in Percy's dark eyes. This, Harry said, his voice growing stronger, is anathema. This is cleansing. He focused. The light intensified, not burning, but pushing, an overwhelming force of purity. I banish you, Valak. I cast you out from this world, from this body, from this reality. By the sacred power of conviction, by the purity of hope, by the very essence of light, I command you, be gone. The Elder Wand blazed with an unprecedented radiance. It wasn't just magic, it was spiritual fire. A beam of blinding white light, unlike any spell Harry had ever cast, shot forth from the wand. It wasn't a narrow jet of energy, but a widening wave of pure, sacred force that washed over the great hall, extinguishing the cursed flames, calming the stormy ceiling, and pushing back against the encroaching shadows. When the light struck Percy's possessed form, Valak shrieked. It was an unholy sound, a scream of absolute torment and outrage, echoing through the hall. The illusory nun's habit began to tear, revealing not Percy beneath, but a writhing, skeletal specter of black smoke and contorted, despairing faces. You cannot. I am eternal. I am. Valak's form flickered, Percy's face briefly returning, contorted in agony, before being swallowed again by the demon. Harry pressed forward, taking a step, then another, the light from the Elder Wand a living shield around him. Hermione, now recovering, watched in awe, her wand gripped tightly but lowered, understanding that this was beyond her ken. Eleonora, however, nodded, tears streaming down her face as she saw her lifelong belief made manifest. You are nothing here, Harry roared, channeling every ounce of his being into the command. You are not welcome. This world rejects you. Return to the void. The light intensified further, consuming Valak's ethereal form. The demon thrashed, a grotesque manifestation of pure malevolence struggling against an absolute force of purity. It tried to recoil, to escape, but Harry's conviction held it in place, like an invisible, inescapable net. Valak's screams grew louder, tearing at the fabric of reality itself, until with a final, ear-splitting wail of defeated malice, it imploded. There was a deafening spiritual crack, like a tear in the cosmos, followed by an abrupt, absolute silence. The black smoke vanished, the despair lifted, and the great hall was suddenly bathed in the gentle, familiar glow of the enchanted ceiling, now showing a serene, starlit sky. Percy Weasley collapsed to the floor, unconscious but breathing, his skin pale, his face slack with exhaustion, but the terrible blackness gone from his eyes. The demon was gone. Harry stood, breathing heavily, the Elder Wand still radiating a faint, warm glow. He felt utterly drained, as if every fiber of his being had been stretched to its limit, but also, strangely at peace. The hollow victory he'd felt after Voldemort was replaced by a profound sense of accomplishment, a deep, resonant understanding of a power far greater than anything he had ever imagined. Hermione rushed to Percy's side, checking him with frantic spells. He's alive. Just deeply exhausted mentally. We'll need Madame Pomfrey. Eleonora walked towards Harry, her steps slow but deliberate. She reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. You did it, Harry. You truly did it. You bridged the gap. You have shown the world a new path. Her eyes, ancient and wise, shone with profound admiration. The Elder Wand, it chose well. It didn't just choose a master, it chose a paradigm shift. Harry looked at the wand in his hand. It no longer felt like a mere tool of magic, but an extension of his own spirit, a channel for a power that blended the arcane with the divine, the learned spell with the unwavering belief. He was no longer just a wizard. He was something more. A guardian. A keeper of a sacred fire previously unknown to his world. The demon was banished. But the silence that followed Valak's departure was not empty. It was filled with the reverberations of what Harry had done, of the new power he had unleashed. The magical world, still reeling from one war, was now poised on the precipice of another, far more profound discovery. What other entities lurked beyond the veil? And how would the wizarding world, so steeped in its traditions, adapt to the truth that its very foundation had just been redefined by the boy who lived and believed